Can I give you something called the gambler's fallacy? But it's just this general idea, okay, that we think of percentages as, hey, if I'm going to get a hit 3 times in 10 and I strike out or ground out or fly out the first 7 times, well, then the next 3 times, statistically speaking, I'm money. That's part of the gambler's fallacy. It's an erroneous belief that if a particular event occurs more frequently than normal during the past, it's less likely to happen in the future, or vice versa. When it has otherwise been established that the probability of such events does not depend on what has happened in the past, such events having the quality of historical independence are referred to as statistically independent, and the fallacy is commonly associated with gambling, where it may be believed, for example, that the next dice roll is more likely, is more usually likely to be 6 because there have recently been less than usual the number of 6s. How does this have anything to do with sports, Gottlieb? Is that what you're thinking? Okay, I got it for you. Basically, the Houston Rockets and even Rockets fans, sports fans in general, I believe, operate under this belief, the gambler's fallacy. It's the live by the 3, die by the 3. Yesterday, the Houston Rockets lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, it should be pointed out that the Rockets, a team that I praised for their defense, continues to play without Russell Westbrook, who's not only former MVP, but previous to this year, the 3 previous years, had averaged a triple-double. He's a tremendous player. They are not at full strength. It is unfair to start any sentence or statement about the Houston Rockets and not point that out. That said, this is an Oklahoma City team that at 44-28 on the season had massively overachieved by everybody's a reasonable expectation. And even though he did not win the most recent coaches award, he did win a partial coach of the year award, meaning Billy Donovan. So you're playing an overachieving crew, and you shoot 58 threes. 58, you make 23. Right? But part of shooting those threes is you stop driving the basketball. They only take 10 free throws. Now, analytics will tell you that you want to get layups, free throws, and threes. They didn't get enough layups. They clearly didn't get enough free throws. And the threes at about 40% on 58 of them is plenty good enough. But it's just too many. Well over half your shots being 3-point shots and not getting to the free throw line. There's a litany of issues with it. But the biggest issue is there's this belief for the Rockets that eventually water will find its level. Eventually the percentages will only help them out. That's kind of the rudimentary look at analytics. And the problem with even the stats, if they're taken as they should be, which is every shot is independent of another shot, the truth is that the gambler's fallacy actually somewhat applies. Because when you add in pressure, you add in fatigue, you add in, for example, in the Western Conference Finals a couple years ago when they missed, what was it, 26 or 27 consecutive threes in a row, that does get in your head, and so you become even less likely to make a shot, to make a 3. And though that actually goes in line with the gambler's fallacy, it's because they believe in the game, because in your heart of heart, in your mind of minds, in the depths of your soul, if you're a 40% 3-point shooter and you miss 3 or 4 in a row, what do you always think to yourself? I'm due. It's the same thing that you tell kids when they're at bat. Kid's a 400 hitter in Little League. He's 0 for 4 during the game. He comes up in extra innings and you tell him, listen, you're hitting 400 in the year. You're due. That's not actually how 400 works. You're 40% likelihood of getting on base, or of getting a hit, on base percentages. What's the likelihood of in that at bat only? And while it's not really and truly independent, because we do know that there are runs and there are good feelings and there are good passes, or there are, hittable counts, or if you've gotten a hit earlier in the game, or if you've hit the pitcher well, you are more likely to get a hit. All of those things go against what I'm talking gambler's fallacy. But the basics of it are, the reason the Rockets keep shooting threes is eventually the numbers will work in their favor because they're playing guards, because that's how they play and it's worth more points. But the reality is that's the gambler's fallacy. You've all sat at the blackjack table and been like a rookie card counter, and not seen face cards, and thought to yourselves the probability of seeing a face card is higher. Who hasn't been at the craps table and you convince yourself that the stats be damned, forget about anything else. I know that I've been running a cold hand, look, we do this thing even at the blackjack table where we'll get up if our dealer gets up. Like, the dealer has anything to do with what card you get. The dealer has nothing to do with what card you get. But how many times have you been sitting there and the dealer does the thing with their hands and you're like, okay, here's a tip. We're both out. I've been running a fever because that dealer has been dealing me good cards. The dealer just deals the cards. Many of these things have auto shuffle. They don't even shuffle the cards anymore. They're basically a friendly robot. This from StatsMuse. That's on Twitter. Most three-pointers missed by a team in a playoff game, 37. The Rockets missed 35 yesterday. They've previously missed 37, 36, and 35. And while the stats will tell you that if you shoot 40% from three, that's way better than shooting 50% from two, the problem is if you don't get to the free throw line, which they didn't, you're back playing defense. If you miss 35 threes, as they did, those are long rebounds. That helps trigger the fast break. Again, you're not getting a break for your defense. You're constantly back in transition. The caroms and rebounds are long. And oh yeah, by the way, you only got 8 offensive boards. You're constantly getting back on defense, playing a longer amount of time, a harder amount of time against a more physical team that shot 28 free throws, 18 more. Look, we've seen all of this before. They allowed Oklahoma City to shoot 49% from the field. That's abysmal defense. They allowed Oklahoma City to get to the free throw line 28 times. They were beaten in offensive rebounds, granted only by 1. And they get beat by a team who I think many people would think their roster is younger and inferior. This is Rockets playoff basketball 101. And if this series doesn't get them, this thing might still go 6. It's 2-2. And Oklahoma City does look a little overmatched at times when Lou Dort is not there as a shooter. He's a very good defender. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a really good player, but not yet there as a shooter. And Chris Paul's a little long in the tooth. Yeah, did have 26 and 3 and 6 rebounds, but didn't make a 3. Steven Adams can be at times ineffective despite a massive size advantage. Like, all of these things are reasonable. That Oklahoma City is a good team. They're fine. But the reason the Rockets constantly lose in the playoffs, once you get further on in the playoffs, is the same reason they're losing now. They take too many threes. They don't get to the free throw line. That causes them to play longer defense, to wear out their legs. They play more games than they normally should. And then when you get later on in the playoffs, now they have the attrition of having played 6 and 7 games in previous playoff series at that same ferocious pace. And what normally would be a 40% shot from 3, which they shoot too often, is now a 35% shot from 3 because they're just exhausted and they're under more pressure. The gambler's fallacy is what the Rockets and Rocket fans and analytic fans that don't truly understand the numbers suffer from. Hey, I didn't make 35. That's okay. I'll take 35 more because the numbers tell me I'm going to make them this time. When the numbers actually don't say that. They say you're 40% likely to make each individual shot. that doesn't go up to 60 or 70 or 80 when you've missed 15 in a row. That's not how it works.